Okay, so one of the most important things that's missing from here is the gear and motor assembly that actually drives the whole thing. Now I do have the threaded cables that actually move the sunroof, but I need the gear to drive them. And because the sunroof option was quite rare, I found that it's just impossible to get those. I've asked on some forums and I've been told to give up. So instead of giving up, I did a little bit of research, and according to some guys on some forums, a Volkswagen part is pretty close to the same like tooth spacing and diameter, and like there's a little bit of an angle on the teeth here. So I bought a Volkswagen Beetle sunroof gear, and it does seem to actually be pretty close. So if I put it in here and line everything up, it does seem to actually want to engage the cables. Now I won't know for sure if it actually engages the cables until I put everything back together and then try to move it. But before I can do that, I have to make this stay on here. So the gear sits about where I want it, but this doesn't sit flush to the bottom and doesn't line up with the holes. So if it did sit flush to the bottom, I just drill some holes in here. But this nub here gives a lot of space between the sunroof rails and the body of this gear here. So I'm just gonna take this piece of aluminum and cut a hole in it, make a spacer for this, and then drill some holes straight through, bolt the whole thing into place, and then I'll reassemble it and see if I can get it to drive these cables. And if I can, then I'll take it all apart, grease everything up, put it back together permanently, and sort out a motor later. So just cut some holes, crudely shaped it out to fit into the profile of the VW part. It's just a spacer, so it's not that important. But I don't have screws that are long enough, so I'm gonna go get some. Okay, it's all in place. Now on the manual sunroofs, I've seen that there's a guide plate that kind of goes right here. This one doesn't look like there might be enough room, but it might need it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this together and see if it turns. Now you'll notice this is not greased up and it's not cleaned out and everything like that. I'm not worried about that right now. So I'm going to put together, see if I can get this to move at all. If I can, I'll take it apart, grease it, put it back together. If I can't, then I know I got to do more work and maybe have to make that little plate that goes here. So this gear does fit, but if I try to turn it with the sunroof assembled, the cables, which should get pulled, like this one gets pulled this way, this one gets pulled this way to move the sunroof, they don't stay in the teeth, they push out like this, and so it's just spinning in place. So what this needs is a plate on top with a kind of a guide to keep these from being able to push out of the gears and force them to actually like move. So I'm just taking a piece of steel right now, cut out a hole in the center, and now I'm carving out grooves for these cables to be guided by. So I'm just starting from the middle and slowly moving my way out because I don't want to make this groove too big on the outside of this, otherwise these cables keep slipping out. But I have to get it big enough that the cables can move inside. So I'm just slowly taking off one more little like millimeter, half millimeter slice as I go until it fits. I haven't really been filming that because it's just a lot of grinding and it's really tedious and the shavings aren't good for the camera. So I'm just going to finish this up and get this all reassembled. And so this is what I ended up with. It's just a steel plate with a couple grooves cut into it and a hole in the center. So the gear sits in the hole here and the cables run through these grooves. Now the grooves are tapered to force the cable into the gear. So there should be enough room in here to let the cable move, but not enough to let it push out of the gear. Now on this side it worked perfectly. On this side I cut it a little bit too square and the gear was still slipping. So I've just put a little bit of steel reinforced epoxy in here to hopefully take some of that slack away. And now we're going to put it back together and see if it works. So success! As you can see, the top and bottom cables now move with the gear. Now I do have to take this apart because I have to grease everything. There's track guides I have to put on there because the cables will pop out like this without the track guides. But once I put this all back together, in theory, I should be able to open and close the sunroof with this gear now, which means in the future I can attach an electric motor to it and have a working sunroof again. So I've gotten all back together now. And one interesting to note about this is because this is a sliding sunroof, it's really hard to seal up the hole to keep water out. So the way these sunroofs work is they don't actually keep water out. There's no seal around here. Instead, there's a tray around here, and there's drain holes in each of the four corners that lead to tubes that go to the bottom of the car. So these sliding style sunroofs actually let water in and just drain it out so it doesn't get into the car. So if you have a sliding sunroof in your car and it's leaking, there probably actually isn't anything wrong with any of the seals. You just might have a clog in one or more of these tubes, so check these tubes. So right now I'm installing the sunroof, and work smarter, not harder. So the sunroof assembly itself isn't all that heavy, but it's heavy and large enough that it really needs 2 people to install. But I've secured the front with ratchet straps and then tighten them up as I bench press the back up so I can get some of the nuts threaded on. So now that the back's threaded on, I can push this up and thread on the front and then go around and tighten everything down, and I can take the straps off. So that's how I'm putting this in by myself. Just to demonstrate that my little sunroof hack actually did work with putting the gear in here and everything like that. If I get a pair of pliers on this, as you can see, I'm able to close the sunroof little by little, which means that once I get a handle or a motor on here, I will actually be able to have a working sunroof. Right now, I just want to make sure I can get the sunroof closed, so if I do have to bring the car outside, then it's not just open. And there we go, sunroof in and closed. First time the sunroof's been in the car and been able to close since I was literally a baby.